Marshall Amps introduced the Studio series back in 2019, the aim being to introduce some of their most iconic and famous amps into a much more compact and manageable format. That's why we are stoked to see more of these classic amps be introduced to this line, and this one might actually be the most exciting of them all. Introducing the Marshall Studio JTM line. Based on the amp that started it all for Marshall, the ST20 captures that warm and creamy guitar tone that players have loved for more than 60 years, but in a much more studio and home-friendly format. Coming in at 20 watts on the full power mode and only 5 watts on the low power mode. Before we get to some sounds, let's just get some of the tech specs out of the way first. Much like the standard version, the ST20 is fully loaded with, and let me just get my notes to make sure that I get this right, 2 ECC83 preamp valves, 1 ECC83 phase splitter, and 2 5881 power amp valves. There's no way I was remembering that. Pretty much the same as the originals, but minus a valve reactor and of course running at the lower wattage. There are 2 cabs available in the line, an upright 2x12 that we're running through today, a 1x12 and a combo version of these two in a 1x12 format. All of them loaded with 65 watt Celestion G12M65 creamback speakers. Breaking down the front of the amp, it's a pretty kind of standard Marshall one-channel EQ interface that if anybody's played a Plexi or any kind of the older style Marshalls, you'll be relatively familiar with. Especially with the 2 volume controls on the high treble loudness 1 and the normal loudness 2. This will control each of the individual channels, which we'll get into in just a second. For anyone who isn't familiar, again, with these kind of layouts, as mentioned, there is technically 2 channels in this amp, but they are controlled via the 4 inputs here. We have a lead and a bass input, the bass actually being a bit of a nod to the original inspiration behind the GTM, which was the Fender Bassman. And both have a high and a low option, which basically kind of controls the gain output or the volume level of both of the channels. Now, just another quick thing, you may notice that during some of the sound examples, we do actually have a patch cable plugged into several of the other inputs as well. Now, this is a kind of classic trick with these style of amps, which people refer to as jumping the channels, or, you know, a couple of extra things you may kind of know it as. But basically what you're doing with that is you're activating additional other channels just with a normal patch cable there, which kind of, it gives the amp a little bit more of a boost and a little bit more of an oomph to it. That's how quite a lot of players would get their old Plexis or their old GTMs to that kind of overdriven style. Because these amps do have quite a lot of headroom in them and they do get clean relatively loud, but most people know Marshalls for their kind of, you know, their crunchy rhythm tones and their searing leads, so we're obviously going to be demonstrating that in the demos. We are running the JTM through the aux box as well, just so we can really get it cooking without, you know, absolutely busting my eardrums because I'm so close to it. And I'm going to be using this lovely limited edition PRS McCarthy S2 for kind of, you know, the humbucker tones, and then I am going to be playing a 61 Custom Shop Strat as well. I am also going to be kicking on a Tubescreamer as well, just when I want to give the amp an extra little boost as well. Just mostly on all the high distortion channels, and just to see how it handles pedals also. think it's safe to say that the JTM absolutely nails that Marshall kind of classic tone, and why shouldn't it? It's the one that started that whole thing. You get a really, really responsive, kind of crunchy rhythm tone just by itself, but then if you do kick on an overdrive or a boost to it, you do get into absolute full face-melting territory for solos or any sort of high gain. It's absolutely worth noting as well how well this amp actually takes pedals. You know, it's just absolutely superb, clean platform, especially for home or studio. Definitely worth noting that to get it up to those slightly higher levels of volume, it will break up ever so slightly. So if you are looking for something with a much higher clean headroom, you know, for kind of louder gigs, or you just like a louder amp, then it's maybe worth looking at the full-blown version. But if you want something that is a little bit more manageable, as I said several times through this video, then the Studio Series is absolutely the answer that you've been looking for. But what do you think? Have you tried any of the Studio lines so far? Is this something that you would be interested in including with your live setup, or even your home or your studio? Let us know in the comments below. You know what they're there for. If there's any other amps you want us to test out, any other guitars, any other pedals, of course, give us a shout in the comments as well. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It's essential at this point. But until then, I've been Keiran. Have a great day.
Huh?